In this video, I'm going to share with you how I'm trying to elevate my game in the courtroom, whether I'm presenting to a judge or arguing to a jury. I'm trying to take my skill set to another level. One way to do that is with visuals in the courtroom. But in order to have the visuals, in order to capture, maintain that attention that's so valuable in the courtroom, I got to have some tech. And so in this video, I'm going to get in my bag like I'm Kyrie Irving. Shout out to all my hoopers out there. And I'm going to share the tech that I bring in the courtroom and walk you through my setup. So my number one goal with having tech that I bring into the courtroom is portability. I need to be able to have everything fit in a backpack so I'm hands-free and feel like I'm not like, I don't know, a turtle that if I were to try and pick something on the ground with a backpack on, maybe my luggage at the airport, I'm not gonna topple over and then be upside down to where I'm like a turtle who's on its shell and can't get up. I don't want that. I also don't want to mess up my spine from having way too much in my bag. So in order to pass the portability test, I'm gonna pick up my backpack. Notice, did it with one hand, and I didn't do what I've started to do ever since I turned 30, seems like many moons ago, where it's like the ugh. Every time I get up or get down, I feel like ugh. A little grunt comes out, but it didn't come out here. And so we can see that my backpack, which shout out to Under Armour, I've had this backpack for 17 years, is not bursting at the seams with the tech that I want to start pulling out of here. So with all that said, let's dive into the bag like I'm Mary Poppins and start pulling some stuff out.
That's a funny sort of bag.
Carpet.
You mean to carry carpets in?
Nope, made of.
First things first, we're looking at the IPEVO document camera. Now I have a video on the IPEVO, which I'll slide above, and that video is going to walk you through the worst case scenario of having and relying upon a courtroom's document camera and not having your own at the convenience of counsel table. Watch that video if you haven't seen it, and you'll also see why the IPEVO document camera is Mark Lanier's secret weapon. If it's good enough for Mark Lanier, it's good enough for me. Now, this IPEVO document camera, without just repeating everything in that video, has an HDMI output. That's going to be important as we go through this actual setup in a minute. One thing when it comes to portability that is a little annoying with the IPEVO is that it doesn't have like a traveling case to help put my paranoid mind at ease. I reached out to my IPEVO contact a long time ago and asked them, like, is there some type of case I can put this in so that when I am traveling and I'm not having to worry about whether or not this extending arm is going to break off or the lens for the camera gets, I don't know, either broken or scratched up. They don't really have anything. So I guess I could do a little bit more research to see if there is a traveling case that's kind of more of a generic rectangle traveling case for this. But the best I'm doing right now is a rubber band that I would put a microfiber cloth or small towel in between to kind of wrap it up, and then just put this in my backpack first. This is going to be hands down the heaviest item that's in the bag. So it's always the first thing that goes in my backpack because this base has a lot of weight to it. And what I'm not showing here is going to be the wires in order to keep this bad boy charged, but make sure that whenever, if or when you get this IPEVO or a document camera, make sure you bring the charging cables and the cables necessary so that you don't have a document camera that you've been lugging around that's dead because it doesn't have a battery. Or if you have one without a battery, then you're definitely gonna need a power source for it. So you don't wanna mess that up. And then along the lines of a power source, always, for the sake of paranoia, bring a power strip. I've obviously haven't had a chance to use it because I've been powered up before I make it to the courtroom and haven't had a chance to take off the wrapping around it. But this is always ready to go whenever I'm ready to go in the courtroom. Moving on, we have my, I think it's an M2 MacBook Air. The use case for this is in order to have better presentations in the courtroom, will connect my MacBook Air to, and we'll talk about the connection in a second, to either the projector or the TV that's being shown in the courtroom in order to show slides. This is going to be mainly for the purpose of slide presentations. If I'm not using it for slide presentations, no, it's not scratched. If I'm not using it for slide presentations, then what I'm basically gonna do is unhook it and use it as a regular computer as needed based on whatever the use case is. But since it's a MacBook Air, super thin, super light, and because it's an M2 chip, the battery efficiency with this is just absurd. So it lasts a super long time.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Also, along the lines of Apple, I have the iPad Pro, which I've been using for a couple of years now. I have a video of how and why and when I use the iPad Pro that you can check out. It's always kind of changing and updating based on me getting more comfortable with the iPad Pro and kind of figuring out how certain apps that are maybe non-legal apps can be applied in a legal context. This, when it comes to presentations, is going to usually be used typically whenever I'm trying to use exhibits. So if I need to like zoom in real quickly and have that like more immersive experience, then the iPad Pro connected to the projector or TV is going to be, I think, superior than using a MacBook Air, because again, I can zoom in, I can zoom out, I can move it, and then I can also write notes, illustrations as needed. And that just makes this something to where you want to have it in your back pocket to make your life a little bit easier, because the more paperless you are, the more portable you'll be and the more organized you'll be. If you have your PDFs already fired up, ready to go on the iPad Pro to where you can just thumb through it, put stamps on it, it makes things so much more seamless than having to flip through papers when or as needed. Another thing I have, let's see if I can find it. This is new. I hadn't had a chance to use it, but this is a wireless presenter. And so what I'll do, by the way, I'll quick time out because I'm blowing through this video as quickly as possible to get you all the information as quickly as possible. I'm gonna provide links down in the description so you can see exactly what I have, see if there's maybe a latest and greatest product for you to be able to get, see if there's a more budget-friendly product for you to get, and ultimately make the decision that's best for you and your budget. Here at Law Venture, we're all about balling on a budget. So this clicker, I'm gonna call it, this wireless presenter, I got off Amazon. It's real sleek. Let's see if you can take a look here. It's matching. Nope, that's not really working. But you can basically see it here. It's real sleek. You can have it in your hand. The buttons are easy to press, easy to find. This is rechargeable, so you don't have to worry about batteries. And it has a laser pointer. And then what you end up doing, it's hiding. It's actually built into the presenter. Is using the USB-C input. It has both USB-A and USB-C input to connect it into the MacBook Air that I have in order for this to be connected to the MacBook Air during a presentation, so I can seamlessly not have to worry about connectivity issues. So again, this connected to the MacBook Air by pulling this receiver connected into the USB-C input, and I'm off to the races on my presentation without having to like walk over and try and go next slide, next slide. Along those lines, you may be asking, okay, why not just use the iPad Pro for your slides and your presentation and use the MacBook Air instead? Because if you're just gonna use it for presentations, then can't you just lighten your backpack a little bit more by sticking with the iPad? With this iPad Pro, maybe it's just because the size of it, I'm not sure. Whenever I'm working on keynotes and I go to presenter mode, I don't see as much of the information in presenter mode as I would like the notes, the next slide, the timer. I want to be able to see all of that, and I typically have a more seamless experience on presenter mode with a laptop. And then that allows me to put the laptop up and basically put it to a point where I can see it. And the benefit of being a plaintiff's attorney is typically the plaintiff's counsel table is next to the jury box. So I can kind of angle in front of the jury without them seeing what I'm seeing on presenter mode, and allow me to see what's on the MacBook as needed. Hope that makes sense. That's probably a question that was going through everyone's mind. Now, the boring stuff, but the necessary stuff. I have 2-gallon baggies that I always keep partitioned like this. We're gonna call gallon baggie right here the charging baggie, and then we're gonna call gallon baggie right here the HDMI connection baggie. The reason why I have 2 baggies is because sometimes I'm traveling and I'm not going to go into the courtroom or take a deposition, but I do want to travel and work. And I am notoriously known for packing in the 11th hour right before a flight ends up happening. And I don't want to have to worry about like removing the HDMI contents of this baggie in order to get just the charging situation that I need in this baggie. So I just grab this one and then throw it in my luggage or my backpack, and I'm off to the races. In this baggie, there is Apple's, I think it's called the travel charger. It's 35 watts, 2 USB-C outputs in order to charge. Very lightweight profile, and also has a little bit of a punch to it. And then you'll see USB charging cables in here. One's for the MacBook Air, one's a USB-C to USB-C, and the other one is a USB-C to Lightning for my iPhone. So simple enough, straightforward, keeps everything nice and charged. So now we're gonna get a little bit more into the logistics for the courtroom. I hope everything's starting to come together as a foundation. I'll bear with me here, because we're gonna get into the flow of the connections in a second. We have the handy dandy switcher. This is the Gana, G-A-N-A HDMI switcher, which I talked about in the IPEVO video that was sliding above earlier. Let's talk about why this is important. In my experience, typically at counsel table, especially where I practice, which is usually in the courtroom of Travis County, we're only given one HDMI input. No other inputs, no other HDMI, just the single one at counsel table. As you can see, I have, you can't see it now, but as you've seen in this video, I have the IPEVO that I want to be able to implement. I have my MacBook Air, and I have my iPad. That isn't necessarily conducive for having only one input at counsel table. So theoretically, what I could do is just have everything set up, and as needed, I could unplug that one HDMI, plug it into the IPEVO. Then whenever I need a presentation, unplug it from the IPEVO, plug into the MacBook Air, and then if I need it for the iPad, unplug, plug back in. But that's just the flow of things is going to be just not smooth. You want to have a smooth presentation. That's when this bad boy, this HDMI switch slash splitter comes in, which is a mouthful to say. So again, you have the one HDMI input, but you also have the 2 where you can connect 2 HDMIs to where I connect the IPEVO on one, and then it's either the MacBook Air or the iPad in the other. And then all you have to do is just click the button on top. It's a pretty sturdy button, and you can hear it. And that will take you from one input to the next. So from either the IPEVO to the MacBook Air or the iPad Pro. And you may be thinking, all right, Jarrett, what if I just want to kind of condense this down? What if I don't want the IPEVO, don't need the IPEVO? What if I just want to bring my iPad and connect it? In that situation, then the one HDMI is enough. Do I really need the switcher slash splitter for HDMI? I say yes, especially because it's so cheap. Here's why. Because you may find yourself in a situation where, okay, you bring just the iPad Pro into the courtroom, and maybe there are times when you're working on the iPad Pro, maybe writing notes, that you don't want it presenting. Well, you could unplug your iPad Pro in that situation, and then just plug it back in when you're ready to start presenting. Or you can use this splitter slash switcher as a way to basically have your screen go black without having the annoyance of having to unplug and replug back in. So if you just have one input on this two, whenever you click it, it goes to the other input, which in that situation, there is nothing. So the screen goes black. It's a quick and easy way to just turn off that connection and not have to worry about presenting whenever you don't want to present whatever's on the screen. So whether or not you're coming in with all three sources of HDMI or you just want to have the one, I recommend having this. I always bring this, even if I'm just bringing my iPad or my MacBook Air, in order to be able to make a switch like that. Okay, also in the HDMI baggie, you'll see HDMI cables. I have two in order to be able to connect into that switcher. And then the handy dandy Apple version, this isn't the knockoff, this is the Apple version that I got from Amazon of the USB-C to HDMI adapter. USB-C here, there's HDMI in the middle, which also splits into USB-A, and then there's a USB-C at the bottom. This is important because my iPad Pro does not have an HDMI output. It just has this one single USB-C output. So adapter goes here, HDMI goes there. That HDMI goes to the splitter, which then goes to the one provided HDMI that the court provides at counsel table. And then I'm connected, ready to go. This is supposed to, and I haven't tested this, so you may need to do your own little test. This is supposed to have the ability to charge the iPad through the USB-C that's below the HDMI as well. So I don't have to worry about the power being drained on the iPad. But I haven't had a chance to test it out because the iPad's battery life is just so incredible that I haven't run into that situation.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Test that and figure out if that's something that is going to be an issue or not in your situation. Also, with my iPad Air, since it's not a MacBook Pro, which I believe MacBook Pros now have an HDMI connection again, they didn't have it for a period of time. I only have charging input and then two USB-Cs on the side of my MacBook Air, which means, again, use the same adapter, connect it, HDMI, then goes to the splitter. And that way I can use, again, either the MacBook Air or the iPad Pro based on my use situation. And then I've already touched on the IPEVO, no adapter necessary. It has an HDMI output in that scenario. And so that can be connected as well. Now you may be asking yourself again, when are you using the MacBook Air compared to the iPad Pro? And I touched on earlier with presentations, but just to put the concept a little bit more concrete, the presentation portion, so using slides, are typically going, in my use case, are typically going to happen during opening and closing or during a hearing, like a certification hearing, where I'm really trying to have like spoon feed my audience a presentation. So in that situation, MacBook Air, which makes it pretty simple. If it's a trial, it's beginning and end of trial, MacBook Air is connected. Everything in between is probably going to be more exhibit based and more of an immersive experience in the moment where I want to write on things. So everything in between is the iPad Pro. So that's kind of, I guess, the workflow. Beginning and end of trial, I'm going to have MacBook Air and IPEVO connected as needed. The meat, the heart of trial, probably be IPEVO and the iPad in that scenario. So I hope this made sense. I'm concerned that somebody is confused out there because this is maybe like drinking information out of a fire hydrant. So I'm gonna recap it one more time. The switcher connects to the one HDMI provided by the court at counsel table. That HDMI switcher connects in one option, iPad Pro or MacBook Air. One or the other on one. The other one for me is gonna be the IPEVO. You could, in your situation, forego the IPEVO and say iPad Pro on one, and I'm gonna put the MacBook Air on the other. In that situation though, you got to have 2 adapters. So know your scenario and know what you need. And then from that point on, it's once you have the adapter and the HDMI set up, you're ready to go. Then it's just practicing with the tech in order to make sure that you're comfortable with it. For example, with the clicker that somehow disappeared in front of me, but reappeared right here. Make sure you know how to use it. Make sure you know how to get it connected, up and running super quickly, super efficiently without slowing down the flow. Because again, it's all about making sure that you're not the reason for any road bumps during a presentation. And more importantly, you are the reason for making the presentation as compelling and as interesting as possible with the visuals that need to be included in how you're arguing or how you're trying to win over your audience, whether it's the judge or the jury. Hope this made sense. Big takeaway also is portability. So if you have any tech that you feel like I need to include in my bag, then let me know. If you feel like this setup is way too cumbersome, way too much, just overkill, and you think there's a more efficient road to achieving a similar goal, let me know in the comment section down as well. Don't hold out on us. Give us that insight, because that's super important. With all that said, what I'll do is I'll remind you to hit the like button down below. Doing so allows videos like this to rank higher so we can reach more people, help more people, get the word out. And I'll also remind you that the link to all the products are down in the description. That way you can check them out, make decisions based on your budget, and then I'll let you go. Have a good one.